Hey guys, welcome back to Sleep Among Titans, where we drift through strange and quiet corners of the past, perfect for listening before you sleep. Tonight we're going to talk about something that frankly didn't really exist dating in the Middle Ages. I know, shocking. There was no swiping right on a grainy portrait of your third cousin, no sliding into DMs via carrier pigeon, no awkwardly asking, "So, what are we?" after you've shared a loaf of bread under the watchful eye of her entire village. No, for most people, romance was less about sparks flying and more about practical alliances so we don't starve this winter. But that doesn't mean love, or at least the quiet hope for it wasn't there. Imagine for a moment a spring evening in medieval Europe. The air is soft, holding the smell of damp earth and new blossoms. From a high stone tower, a castle overlooks a small village below. Two different worlds living under the same sky. The rules for finding a partner were entirely different depending on which world you belonged to. For a lady in that tower, it was a game of politics, poetry, and silent duties. For a girl in the fields below, it was about harvest festivals, shared work, and the approval of her neighbours. So tonight we'll explore both. What was it like to be promised to a stranger you've only seen in a painting? And how did you find connection when your entire life was a struggle for survival? Let's drift back and find out. So let's start inside that castle on the hill. For the nobility, marriage wasn't a personal affair. It was high-stakes business. Let's be clear, it was less happily ever after, and more a mutually beneficial merger and acquisition. You married to secure a border, to gain a title, to end a feud, or sometimes to start a new one. Your personal preference was at best a footnote in the contract. And in one of the castle's quiet, sunlit rooms, we find our first subject, Lady Eleonora. Her world is one of straight lines and expected patterns, much like the embroidery she's working on. The only sounds are the gentle tap-tap of her needle through the taut linen and the distant muffled sounds of the castle courtyard below, men shouting, horses stamping. Her life is comfortable, safe, and almost entirely decided for her. She knows her duty is to her family's name and she expects to fulfill it. But duty is a cold companion, and the silence in these stone rooms is very, very deep. Now let's drift down the hill into the open air of the village. For our second subject, Isolde life is anything but silent. It's filled with the bleating of sheep, the call of the wind, and the chatter of her neighbours. For her and her community, marriage is also a contract, but a different kind. It's a partnership for survival. Her checklist for a husband probably didn't include owns a dragon-slaying sword, but more like is strong enough to help with the harvest and doesn't have a cruel temper. It's a choice born of practicality, but it's a choice made among familiar faces. Two young women living worlds apart. One's future is about to arrive from a foreign land, not on a white horse, but as a piece of painted vellum. The other's chance for connection isn't in a sealed letter, but in the music and laughter of a village festival just around the corner. Let's return to that quiet, sunlit room in the castle, to Lady Eleonora. Before we get to the life-altering news, it's important to understand the texture of her days. They are for the most part identical. The sun rises and the light crawls across the stone floor in the same pattern. She wakes, she prays, she dresses in heavy, immaculate gowns. She eats, and then for hours she sits here in this chair with her needle and thread. The work is intricate. She's stitching a scene of a hunt onto a heavy piece of linen, a stag forever poised to leap, hounds forever straining at the leash, knights on horseback, their lances raised. It is a world of frozen dramatic action, and her role is to give it colour one tiny perfect stitch at a time. The sound of her needle is the only clock in the room. Tap, tap, tap. A rhythm of patience, a rhythm of waiting. Her entire life has been a practice in the art of waiting. Waiting for her life to truly begin. Today the rhythm breaks. It isn't a loud interruption. It's just the sound of footsteps in the stone corridor outside, heavier than a servant's, slower, more deliberate. The great oak door to her chamber creaks open. It's her father, Lord Richard. He's a man built of stone and strategy, his face a map of old battles and current political anxieties. He doesn't smile often, and when he does, it rarely reaches his eyes. He's not a cruel man, but his love for his daughter is filtered through the lens of duty and dynasty. He closes the door behind him, and the quiet of the room shifts. It is no longer peaceful. It is now heavy with purpose. Eleonora puts her needle down and rises, her posture perfect, her hands clasped before her. "Eleonora," he says, his voice a low rumble. He doesn't waste time with pleasantries. He walks to the small table beside her, and from within his heavy tunic he produces a small soft pouch of deep blue velvet tied with a golden cord. He places it on the table. The sound it makes is barely a whisper, but to Eleonora it's as loud as a thunderclap. She knows what this is. Every noble daughter knows what this moment means. This is, for lack of a better term, the medieval equivalent of a dating profile picture. Except there's no bio, no mention of his love for long walks on the parapets, and definitely no picture of him holding a large fish he's just caught. There is only this, a promise and a face. From the Duke of Montaigne, her father says, for his eldest son Guillaume. The name hangs in the air. Guillaume, a name she has never heard belonging to a man she has never met from a place she has never seen. And yet this name is now meant to be the architect of her entire future. Her father gestures to the pouch. See for yourself. Notice he doesn't ask, so what do you think, is he your type? The question is not for her opinion. The viewing is a formality, a courtesy. The deal is already being brokered in letters filled with talk of land trade routes and military allegiance. Eleonora's fingers tremble just slightly as she reaches for the pouch. The velvet is soft and cool. She slowly unties the golden cord. Her heart is not racing. It's doing something far stranger. It feels as if it has slowed to a single heavy beat, waiting. She tips the pouch and into her palm slides a small weighty object, a miniature portrait no bigger than the palm of her hand set in a delicate frame of carved ivory. She doesn't look at it right away. She just feels its presence, the weight of it. This is a man's life, a man's lineage, and now her own future, all condensed into this one small, beautiful object. She takes a breath, a quiet, steadying one, and she looks down. The artist was clearly skilled. The man's face is painted on a thin sheet of vellum with painstaking detail. He's young, perhaps a few years older than her. His hair is dark, his jaw is strong. His eyes, the colour of moss or deep water, stare straight ahead, not at her but at some distant point beyond the artist. It is a serious, composed expression. It is the face of a man who understands his own importance. And here is where the personal commentary of the past comes in. Painters back then knew who paid the bills. A weak chin could be artistically strengthened. A scar could be forgotten. A sullen expression could be softened into one of thoughtful gravity. Eleonora knows this. She isn't just looking at a man, she is looking at a piece of marketing. So she looks deeper. She ignores the strong jawline, the noble set of the shoulders. She looks into the eyes. She tries to find something real there. Is that seriousness, or is it arrogance? Is that composure, or is it a lack of warmth? Is there kindness there? Is there a flicker of humour that the artist failed to capture or failed to invent? She finds nothing. Nothing but a well-painted mask. He is a stranger, a collection of features, an idea. The man she will marry, the father of her children, the keeper of her life, and he is a complete and total blank. A strange sort of calm settles over her. The fear is there, yes, a cold stone in the pit of her stomach. But on the surface there is only resignation. This is her purpose. This is the moment her whole life has been a prelude to. The Duke's lands border the southern pass, her father says, his voice cutting through her thoughts. He begins to pace his mind already on the map of the kingdom. This alliance will secure it. Their trade agreements will give us leverage with the river barons. It is a good match, Eleonora, a powerful one. He speaks of her life as if it were a fortress to be secured. He speaks of her future as if it were a territory to be gained. And in a way it is. She understands. But as she stands there listening to the cold calculus of her own value, she cannot take her eyes off the face in her hand. Guillaume. He leaves her then. Her father concludes his strategic summary and departs, leaving the heavy oak door to close with a final definitive thud. And Eleonora is alone again. The silence returns to the room, but it is different now. It is no longer empty. It is filled with the unblinking gaze of a painted stranger. She sinks back into her chair, the ivory frame cold against her skin. Her world of waiting is over. A new kind of waiting has just begun. And you have to wonder as she sits there in her silent gilded cage what is happening down in the village. For a life as constrained as Eleonora's, another must be lived in the open. A world away from portraits and politics, a different kind of matchmaking is about to begin, one that smells not of oil paint and parchment, but of wood smoke ale and the coming of spring. Let's leave the cold silence of the castle behind. Let's drift down the hillside following the sound of that music past the neat rows of tilled earth and into the heart of the village. Because while Eleonora was contemplating her future in a piece of painted ivory, a completely different kind of social ritual was exploding into life. Today is May Day. For 364 days a year, life here is a relentless cycle of hard, grinding work. Mending fences, hauling water, pulling weeds, praying the harvest doesn't fail, praying the winter isn't too cruel. But today is the exception. Today the work stops. Today is a day of pure, unadulterated release. The village green, usually just a muddy patch of grass for geese to wander through, has been transformed. At its centre is the Maypole, a tall birch trunk stripped of its branches, now decorated with long, colourful ribbons. The air, which usually smells of manure and wood smoke, now carries the rich scent of roasting pig and spilled ale. This isn't a polite, formal gathering. It's loud, it's chaotic, it's earthy, it's gloriously unapologetically alive. And this right here was the primary dating scene for the common folk. This was the medieval equivalent of the crowded bar or the summer music festival. It was a chance to see and be seen, a public arena where connections could be forged all under the guise of celebrating the arrival of spring. And somewhere in this joyful chaos we find Isolde. She isn't dancing around the Maypole just yet. She's standing near the edge of the green with a few other village girls sharing a clay cup of watered-down ale. Her face, usually serious and focused on a task, is flushed with warmth from the nearby bonfire and the general excitement. She's laughing a genuine, unrestrained sound that would be entirely out of place in Eleonora's stone chamber. She's watching the dancers, their feet stomping in the dirt, weaving the bright ribbons into a messy, beautiful pattern around the pole. For her, this day isn't about finding a husband. Not explicitly. It's about feeling free. It's about forgetting for a few precious hours the constant weight of survival. But the reality is every interaction here is a kind of audition. Every glance, every shared joke is being filed away not just by the young people themselves, but by the entire community. The mothers and fathers sitting on benches and pretending not to watch are the real judges. They're taking notes, and then she sees him, Thomas, the carpenter's son. He's not a knight or a lord. He doesn't have a noble bearing. He's tall and his shoulders are broad from swinging an axe and hauling timber. He's standing with his own friends laughing at some joke, his teeth white in his sun-browned face. To the modern eye, he might seem unremarkable, but to Isolde he represents a collection of highly desirable traits. His hands are strong and calloused. He is a hard worker. He is laughing with his friends. He is not ill-tempered. His father is a respected carpenter. His family is stable. This isn't a cold romantic checklist. This is a practical assessment of character. This is the foundation upon which a life could be built. Their eyes meet across the flickering flames of the bonfire, just for a second. It's not a smouldering, dramatic gaze. It's a simple moment of acknowledgement, a spark of recognition in the crowd. A little while later, the Maypole dance subsides, and people gather closer to the bonfires as twilight begins to settle. And somehow, in the natural shifting of the crowd, Thomas is suddenly standing near her. "Isolde," he says, his voice warm. It's not a grand opening line. It's just her name. "Thomas," she replies, her smile a little shy now that he's close. "Your father did good work on the new church door." This is how it starts. There's no poetry. There's no talk of chivalry or undying devotion. They talk about things that matter in their world. They talk about the new door on the church. They talk about the worrying lack of rain last week. He tells a funny story about his father's donkey and she laughs again. She tells him about a fox that has been trying to get into their chicken coop. It seems like nothing. Just small talk. But it's everything. In this simple, grounded conversation, they are learning about each other. He is showing he is observant and has a sense of humour. She's showing she is practical and responsible. They are speaking the language of their shared reality. They are building a tiny bridge of understanding right here in the middle of this loud, happy crowd. He offers her a piece of roasted meat on a sliver of wood. She accepts. They eat in comfortable silence for a moment, the warmth of the fire on their faces, the sounds of the festival swirling around them. This simple act of sharing food is more intimate than any of Eleonora's fantasies about the knights in her storybooks. This is real. The interaction doesn't end with a promise or a declaration. It ends with a simple nod. "I'll see you at the market, Isolde." And then he's gone back to his friends. As the festival winds down and Isolde walks home under a sky full of stars, the cool night air on her warm face, she feels a quiet sense of possibility. It's not a grand earth-shattering love, it's a feeling of potential, a seed planted in the common soil of her life. Her path to partnership is public, practical, and woven into the very fabric of her community. But back in the castle, for Lady Eleonora, the path is the exact opposite. It is private, abstract, and lonely. And it's about to take a strange and literary turn into a world where love wasn't something you shared over a bonfire, but something you declared in secret poems to a person you could never ever touch. So back we go up the hill to the world of stone walls and silent corridors. While Isolde is walking home with the ghost of a smile and the memory of a shared, simple conversation, Eleonora is about to encounter an entirely different kind of romance. A kind of romance so strange, so elaborate, and so counterintuitive to us now that we need to take a moment to understand the rules of the game. We're talking about courtly love. Now, this wasn't love as we know it. It was a phenomenon born from French poetry that swept through the noble courts of Europe, and it was essentially a beautifully complex set of rules for how a knight should, for all intents and purposes, worship a high-born lady from afar. The key here is from afar, and crucially the lady was almost always unattainable and very often already married to someone else. The whole thing was a performance. The knight's job was to suffer. He was to be struck by her beauty as if by a lightning bolt. He had to perform great deeds in her name, wear her colours in tournaments, and most importantly write incredibly sad poems about how his love for her was both ennobling him and slowly killing him. The lady's job was to be, well, the lady, distant, virtuous, and the flawless object of his devotion. To our modern ears it sounds bizarre, pointless even. But it served a vital social purpose. It was a civilizing force. It took a restless warrior class of young landless knights and gave them a way to channel their aggression into art and devotion. It taught them manners. It was in a way an elaborate HR exercise to prevent sword fights in the hallways, and Lady Eleonora, engaged to a man she's never met, is about to become the subject of this very game. It begins as these things often did at a formal dinner in her father's great hall. The room is loud with conversation, the clatter of plates and the scrape of benches. Eleonora is seated near her father, a silent decorative presence as usual, and across the hall among the younger, less important knights is Sir Geoffrey. He's a third son of a minor baron, meaning he has a noble name but no land to inherit. All he has is his sword, his training and his ambition. And he is staring at her. It's not a vulgar stare. It's a carefully calibrated performance of awe and reverence. When her eyes happen to pass over him, he doesn't look away. He holds her gaze for a moment longer than is proper, his expression one of pure painful adoration, before casting his eyes down as if unworthy. Eleonora is not naive. She has seen this game played before between other knights and ladies of the court. She knows the script, but it is one thing to watch a play and another entirely to find yourself cast as the lead. A faint warmth rises in her cheeks, and she quickly looks down at her plate, her heart beating just a little faster. The next day, it escalates. As she's walking through a quiet covered cloister in the castle garden, one of her mother's young page boys approaches her. He bows low, and without a word offers her a small piece of folded parchment, sealed with a plain wax seal, no insignia. Then he scurries away. Her hands tremble as she takes it. This is dangerous. This is a secret. She finds a secluded stone bench hidden by rose bushes and breaks the seal. The handwriting inside is elegant, practiced. It's a poem. It doesn't use her name, of course. It speaks of the sun that shames the moon, of a rose whose beauty is a sweet torment. It's filled with dramatic, overwrought declarations of suffering and devotion. The author claims that her briefest glance is a feast, and her indifference is a famine. It is by all measures completely over the top, and yet, as she reads the words, something inside her begins to thaw. This is the first time in her life that anyone has spoken of her beauty as a thing of power. To her father, her looks are an asset in a negotiation. To the servants, she is their mistress to be obeyed. To the portrait of Guillaume, she is just the other half of a contract. But to the author of this poem, she is a star, a goddess, the centre of an entire emotional universe. It's a fantasy. She knows it's a fantasy. Sir Geoffrey probably wrote a similar poem to another lady last year. It's a game, a fiction. But as she sits there in the quiet of the garden, the stiff parchment in her hand feels more personal and more real than the cold, heavy ivory of the miniature she keeps hidden in a wooden box in her room. The portrait is a fact. It is the truth of her future. The poem is a beautiful lie, and right now the lie feels infinitely warmer. She folds the parchment carefully and hides it in a sleeve of her gown. It's her secret now, a tiny private flame of feeling in the cold, dutiful landscape of her life. She's being adored, not appraised. And the difference is intoxicating. So while one love story begins to bloom as a secret written fantasy, what of the other, the one built on shared glances and simple words by a bonfire? Love for Isolde and Thomas cannot survive on poetry. It must be tested in the real world through shared burdens and common goals. It must prove its worth not with words but with work. Let's let Eleonora keep her secret. Let's let her sit with the warmth of that beautiful, dangerous lie. Because love in the world outside the castle walls couldn't afford to be a fantasy. It had to be real. It had to be strong. It had to be able to carry a heavy bucket of water on a cold morning. We're back in the village. The sun is just beginning to burn the mist off the fields, and we're following Isolde on one of the most essential, repetitive, and unglamorous tasks of her life, the morning trip to the well. The village well was the original office water cooler. It was the social hub, the centre of gossip, the place where news was exchanged, and judgments were quietly formed. A trip to the well was never just a trip to the well, and lately for Isolde this has become especially true. Her routine is the same every day. She picks up the 2 heavy wooden buckets, their iron hoops cold in her hands, and walks the familiar path to the centre of the village. But in the weeks since the May Day festival, a new unspoken element has been added to the routine. She often finds that Thomas the carpenter's son happens to be there at the exact same time. It's a coincidence that has started to feel deliberate, a silent mutual appointment that neither of them would ever dare acknowledge. This was their version of going for coffee. It was less romantic, a lot more work, and infinitely more telling. Today is no different. As she approaches, she sees him. He's already there, his back to her, pulling on the thick, coarse rope, drawing a bucket up from the darkness. And in this moment, we see what Isolde sees. She's not just looking at a man. She's looking at a potential partner, and her assessment is deeply practical. She notices the easy strength in his shoulders, the way he moves with a steady, unhurried rhythm. He is not fighting the weight. He is working with it. This is a man who understands his tools and his own power. He is competent. In a world where incompetence could lead to starvation, this is an incredibly attractive quality. This is reliability in human form. He hears her footsteps and turns a small, welcoming smile on his face. Isolde, the ground is thirsty today. That it is, she says, setting her own buckets down. The beans are starting to look worried. Again, this small, simple talk. Not about feelings, but about the shared world around them. The weather, the crops. This is the language of their life, and fluency in it is a sign of a sound mind. He finishes drawing his water and moves aside for her. As she takes the rope, her hands brushing the same spot his had just been, he doesn't leave. He leans against the low stone wall of the well watching, and he notices something. The rope is fraying here, he says, pointing to a spot near the top. It will hold for now, but if it snaps with a full bucket, he doesn't need to finish. A lost bucket was a disaster. A new one cost money the village didn't have, and the time to retrieve the old one was time stolen from the fields. Isolde nods, looking at the frayed section. She'd noticed it too, but what could she do? It was just another thing to worry about. But Thomas the carpenter's son sees not just a problem, but a solution. I'll bring a new rope from my father's workshop tomorrow, he says. It's not a question. It's a statement, a quiet promise. This gesture is more profound than 100 poems about the sun and the moon. Sir Geoffrey offers Eleonora elaborate words, a fantasy of devotion. Thomas offers Isolde something infinitely more valuable: security, competence, the quiet assurance that he sees a problem and knows how to fix it. Then he does something else. He takes the rope from her hands. Here, he says, let me. And he begins to draw her water for her, bucket after bucket. He fills both of her pails to the brim, the muscles in his arms tightening with the strain. He is quite literally taking the weight off her shoulders. He's giving her the gift of his energy, the gift of 5 minutes where her own back doesn't have to ache. In their world, this is a declaration. It's an act of service. It's a demonstration of his ability and his willingness to provide. When he's done, he helps her settle the heavy yoke across her shoulders. For a moment they stand close, the smell of sawdust and clean sweat from him, the smell of earth and herbs from her. Thank you, Thomas, she says, her voice quiet. It's nothing, he replies, though they both know it is something. As she walks back home, her steps measured under the heavy load, The water sloshing gently in the buckets, she feels a different kind of warmth from the one Eleonora feels from her poem. It's not a secret, intoxicating flame. It's a steady, solid heat, the warmth of trust, the feeling of a bond being built not on air and words, but on wood and stone and water. But these quiet daily meetings, these shared waits and unspoken promises do not go unnoticed. The village is watching, their families are watching, and for this sturdy practical connection to become anything more, it must be brought out of the morning mist and into the light. It will need the approval of the two great pillars that support their world, their families, and the God they both worship. So we have two budding romances. One is a secret written in poetic code and fueled by the heady thrill of a beautiful lie. The other is an open secret built on shared glances, simple words, and the very real weight of a bucket of water. But in the medieval world, personal connection was just the prologue. The story could not move forward without the approval of the two most powerful institutions in anyone's life, their family and the church. Let's imagine it's Sunday. The bell tolls across the land calling everyone to worship, and for this 1 hour the worlds of Eleonora and Isolde almost touch. Eleonora sits with her family in their private chapel, a small ornate space sectioned off from the main congregation. The air is thick with expensive incense. The light filtering through the stained glass window paints jewels of colour on the stone floor. Down below in the main nave of the church stands Isolde with her family and the rest of the village. The air here smells of damp wool, packed humanity and beeswax. They cannot see each other, but they are hearing the same words. The priest, his voice echoing in Latin and then translated into the common tongue, speaks of order. He speaks of the divine plan. He reminds the congregation that every soul has its place, the noble to rule the peasant, to work, the man to lead the woman to follow. He speaks of marriage not as a union of hearts, but as a sacred duty, a holy sacrament meant to create new life and maintain the stability of God's kingdom on earth. To the modern ear, it sounds like a lecture on conformity, and well it was. The subtext of the entire sermon was, know your place. Your personal desires are fleeting and foolish. The structure is eternal. Obey it. And how does this land on our two young women? For Eleonora sitting straight-backed on the hard wooden pew, each word is another stone reinforcing the walls of her destiny. The priest's sermon sanctifies her father's political ambitions. Her duty to marry the unseen duke's son is not just a family matter, it is a divine one. Any thought of Sir Geoffrey's poem feels trivial, even sinful in this holy space. For Isolde standing in the crowd, the words are a comfort. The idea of a divinely ordered world feels safe. A good, strong, kind husband like Thomas isn't a compromise. He is a blessing, a sign of God's favour. For her, the sermon doesn't feel like a cage. It feels like a blueprint for a good and righteous life. The sermon ends and the divine instruction is followed by the familial. Later that week, Eleonora is summoned by her mother, Lady Isabel. The conversation takes place not in a formal hall, but in her mother's private chambers. This is a lesson from one woman to another. Lady Isabel is not unkind, but she is a pragmatist. She has been through this herself. The poetry and the songs are for entertainment, Eleonora. She says, her hands deftly sorting through household linens. Your power will not come from a knight's flattering words. It will come from running your husband's household so perfectly that he never has to think of it. It will come from producing a healthy son and heir to secure the alliance. It will come from being a gracious and intelligent hostess who can identify your husband's enemies before he can. Love is a child's fantasy. Respect and security are a woman's reality. Her mother is teaching her how to be a duchess. She's handing down the hard-won knowledge of female power in a man's world. But every word of this practical cold advice makes the secret poem in Eleonora's dress feel smaller and more foolish. The walls are closing in. Meanwhile, in Isolde's small smoky cottage, a different kind of family conversation is taking place. It happens over the mending of clothes by the fire. Her parents are talking ostensibly to each other, but loudly enough for her to hear. The carpenter's boy, Thomas, her father says. He has a good head on his shoulders. I saw him replacing the rope at the well before it could snap. He's a hard worker, her mother adds, not looking up from her sewing. And he doesn't spend his evenings drinking his wages away at the tavern. His family has a good name. They have 2 pigs and a healthy cow, her father muses. A good start for a new household. This isn't a board meeting, it's a risk assessment. The risk isn't a border war, it's a failed harvest. They are discussing the building blocks of a life, and in every word there is approval. There is warmth. Isolde, listening from the corner, feels a quiet joy. Her own shy hopes are being validated by the practical wisdom of her parents. For her personal desire and family duty are walking the same path. So here we stand, at the end of these first stirrings. For both Eleonora and Isolde, the path forward is now clear, paved by the immense powers of family and faith. One path leads toward a gilded cage, a political alliance where her heart is a non-issue. The other leads toward a practical partnership, where her heart's inclination and her family's approval are one and the same. The time for quiet glances, secret poems and unspoken arrangements is over. The great slow-moving machinery of society is about to engage, and as the heat of summer begins to ripen the fields, so too are their fates about to ripen, ready to be harvested before the coming of winter. Before we continue with the stories of Eleonora and Isolde, we need to pause. We need to let time do what it does, especially in a world that ran not on the ticking of clocks, but on the grand, slow, irrefutable rhythm of the sun and the soil. The private internal stirrings of spring and early summer are over. Now the great wheel of the year begins its inevitable turn towards autumn, and it will carry our characters' fates along with it. Let's first settle into the peak of summer. Imagine the stillness of a late July afternoon. The air is thick and heavy with heat shimmering over the fields. The world seems to be holding its breath. The only sound is the low, constant, hypnotic drone of a million insects in the long grass. The greens of the landscape are deep and lush, almost overwhelmingly so. The days are extravagantly long, stretching from a pale dawn to a dusky twilight that lingers for hours. This is a season of quiet growth of waiting. In her stone room, which offers little relief from the oppressive heat, Eleonora waits. The secret poem is a distant memory now, a brief foolish flicker in the face of the solid, unchangeable reality of her betrothal. The plans are being made. Messengers on tired horses have been riding back and forth between her father's castle and the Duke of Montaigne's their saddlebags, filled with the dry parchment that constitutes her future. Down in the village, Isolde also waits. She and Thomas continue their unspoken appointments at the well, their conversations still simple and practical. But the looks between them now hold a deeper shared understanding. The whole village sees it. Their parents see it. The matter is no longer a question of if, but of when. And the when depends entirely on the season. Everything waits for the harvest, and then the first sign of the turning arrives. It's so subtle you could miss it. It's a single brilliant yellow leaf on the branch of a sycamore tree that is otherwise completely green. It's a phantom, a messenger from the future. Then another follows. Soon the mornings have a new sharp, clean edge to them, a hint of coolness that is gone by midday but promises a change to come. The angle of the sun is lower, casting longer shadows in the evening. The relentless drone of the insects begins to soften. The world is slowly, gently beginning to exhale. This is the signal. The harvest begins, and with it the energy of the entire landscape changes. The sleepy stillness of summer is shattered by a great communal burst of urgent work. From dawn until dusk the fields are filled with people. The sound is a symphony of labor, the rhythmic shh of scythes cutting through dry stalks of wheat. The chatter and calls of the workers, the creak of wooden carts laden with golden sheaves. It is a race against time, against the threat of an early rain that could ruin everything. This is the most important moment of the year. The harvest is the physical manifestation of an entire year's hope and labor. It is the culmination of everything. And as the grain is gathered from the fields and brought safely into the barns, so too are human lives gathered and settled into new arrangements. A daughter cannot be married off if the family is facing starvation. The new household cannot be formed on an empty larder. The success of the harvest dictates the success of everything else. It is the bedrock upon which all human plans are built. As the last of the grain is stored, the turning accelerates. The world catches fire. The deep greens of summer give way to a riot of blazing colour. The trees become torches of red, orange, and shimmering gold. The air grows crisp and clear, and the sky seems a deeper, more piercing blue. The smell of the world changes too. It's the scent of wood smoke from 100 cottage chimneys, the rich, damp, earthy smell of decaying leaves, the sweet, sad perfume of the year coming to an end. The world begins to contract. The nights grow longer, colder. The animals retreat. The people retreat. The focus shifts from the open fields to the warm circle of the hearth. This is a time of consolidation, of taking stock, of preparing for the long, dark quiet of winter. And with this sense of an ending comes a sense of urgency. Any business that needs to be concluded must be concluded now. A journey that must be taken must begin before the roads become impassable with snow and mud. A marriage contract that has been negotiated must be signed and sealed. A promise that has been made must be fulfilled. The season of waiting is over. The harvest is in. The future, which was a distant concept in the lazy heat of summer, is now knocking at the door. For one of our young women, a journey is about to begin. A long, slow procession that will carry her away from everything she has ever known. For the other, a quiet negotiation will take place by the fireside, a meeting of two families to formally join their fortunes. The time for feelings is done. The time for logistics has begun. Autumn has settled over the land, and with it a sense of quiet urgency. The time for waiting is over. The human business must be concluded before the winter snows lock the world away. And so, in the pale, crisp light of an October morning, a procession gathers in the main courtyard of Eleonora's home. This is the day of her departure. It is a grand affair. A dozen guards wearing her father's colours sit astride their horses, their breath pluming in the chilly air. Servants bustle about loading chests filled with gowns, linens and jewellery, the worldly possessions that will accompany her to her new life. And at the centre of it all stands the vehicle that will be her home and her prison for the next several weeks, a litter. Let's not picture a simple carriage. This is essentially a small ornate room carried on two long poles borne between two very sturdy horses. It's a gilded cage on stilts designed to shield its precious cargo from the mud, the rain and the gazes of common folk. It is a symbol of status and a bubble of profound isolation. The farewells are as formal and structured as everything else in her life. Her father, his face unreadable as always, gives her a stiff, brief embrace. "Do your duty, Eleonora," he murmurs, his voice rough. "Bring honour to our name." It is a command, not a comfort. Her mother clings to her for a moment longer, her tears hot on Eleonora's cheek. "Be clever," she whispers her own practical advice, a desperate plea. "Be strong." Then it's time. She walks to the litter, her movements graceful and measured, betraying none of the cold fear knotting in her stomach. A servant opens the small curtained door. She climbs in, settles herself amongst the velvet cushions, and the door is closed. The outside world is immediately muffled. The bright, sharp morning becomes a dim, enclosed space. This is it. The final closing of a door on her entire childhood. And then, with a lurch and a shout from the guards, the journey begins. The first few hours are a blur of confusing emotions, but soon the journey finds its own rhythm, and it is a rhythm of deep, unwavering monotony. This is the central reality of her new life. The constant swaying, rocking motion, a lurch to the side as a horse navigates a rut in the road, a gentle bounce as they pick up speed on a flat stretch. It is a motion designed to lull, to numb. Her world shrinks to the sounds that can penetrate her moving chamber. The steady, hypnotic thump, 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 thump of the horses' hooves on the road, the rhythmic jingle of their harnesses, the low, constant creak of the leather straps and the wooden frame of the litter itself. Occasionally, the low murmur of the guards' voices, their words indistinct. It's a soundscape that quickly becomes a kind of white noise, a backdrop for a mind turned inward. Her role in this grand procession is entirely passive. She's not steering, she's not navigating, she's not even walking. She's simply being delivered like a very important, very fragile parcel. Days bleed into one another. She marks the time by the changing quality of the light through the small, silk-curtained window. She sees the world pass by in a series of fleeting, disconnected vignettes. A dense, dark forest of oak trees, their last crimson leaves clinging stubbornly to the branches. A wide open field harvested and bare, with birds picking at the stubble. A muddy, rutted track through a windswept marsh. Sometimes they pass through a village. She peeks through the curtain and sees the faces of the common people turn towards her procession. They stop their work to stare at the armed guards, the fine horses and the mysterious closed box at the centre. They look with curiosity, perhaps with resentment, perhaps with awe. To them she's a creature from another world, and from her perspective so are they. She's a ghost passing through their reality, and they are brief fleeting figures in hers. The distance between her and the world has never felt so vast. The nights are spent at other castles, the homes of minor lords loyal to her father, or at heavily fortified inns. The hospitality is always correct, always formal. She is given the best chambers, served the finest food they have to offer. But it is the sterile politeness of strangers. There is no warmth, no familiarity. Each night is just a pause, a temporary stop in a state of permanent transit. She is no longer of her father's house, but she's not yet of her husband's. She exists in a state of in-between, a noble refugee moving from one life to the next. She spends the long hours reading stitching or simply staring at the patterns on the brocade walls of her litter. She thinks of Guillaume, the man with the painted face, but it is hard to conjure any real feeling. He is still just an idea, an abstract concept at the end of this long swaying road. More often she thinks of the home she left behind, the face of her favourite maid, the feel of her own bed, the sound of the birds in the castle garden. Her life is now made of memories and a terrifying unknown future, and so her journey continues, a slow, lonely crawl across the autumn landscape, a grand, important and soul-crushingly boring pilgrimage towards her destiny. But as her litter sways on, another much shorter journey is about to be made back in the world she left behind. It won't involve guards or horses. It is a journey of only a few hundred paces from one cottage to another. It is the journey of two families coming together by a humble fireside to do what her own family did with letters and messengers, to formally negotiate a marriage and to seal a future. Let's leave Eleonora in her swaying solitary world for a moment. Let's let her litter continue its slow crawl across the autumn landscape. Because while her future is being delivered, Isolde's future is being decided right here, in a small low-beamed cottage that smells of wood smoke and simmering stew. This is the night. There is a quiet tension in the small room, but it's the tension of importance, not conflict. Isolde and her parents have been cleaning all day. The dirt floor is swept clean, fresh herbs are strewn to sweeten the air, and their best, albeit slightly chipped clay cups are set out. They are awaiting guests, Thomas and his father and mother. This is not a casual visit. This is the meeting. This is the medieval peasant version of two corporate legal teams hammering out the details of a merger, except here the stakes are far more personal and the assets are things you can actually touch. A knock comes at the door. Isolde's father opens it, and there they are, Thomas and his parents, their faces serious in the flickering firelight. They don't come empty-handed. Thomas's father carries a small cask of ale, a formal gift of respect. Greetings are exchanged, quiet and formal. They are all shown to their seats on benches near the hearth, and crucially Isolde and Thomas are here. They sit a little apart, silent observers of their own fate. Unlike Eleonora, who is hundreds of miles away from her own negotiation, they are present. They are not the main speakers, but their presence matters. They are the living, breathing subjects of this discussion, not just names on a piece of parchment. After a few moments of polite silence, Isolde's father clears his throat and begins. There is no flowery language. He gets straight to the point. Thomas is a good boy, he says, looking at Thomas's father. He is strong and he is a hard worker. Our Isolde, he glances at his daughter with a flicker of pride, is a good girl. She is healthy, and her hands are never idle. This is the opening statement, a summary of the primary assets: good health and a strong work ethic. Thomas's father nods slowly. That they are, so let us speak of how we can join them to make one strong household from two. And so the negotiation begins, and it is a negotiation of things. Real, tangible, life-sustaining things. Isolde's father outlines her dowry. This isn't about chests of gold or deeds to land. We can offer the brown cow, he says. This is a monumental offer. A cow is a source of milk, butter and cheese. It is a factory for producing life-sustaining food. Its future calves are a source of immense wealth. The narrator in my head wants to say this is the equivalent of a trust fund, and honestly that's not far off. She will also bring with her 6 bolts of linen, her mother adds, her voice firm, woven by her own hands. This is also a huge contribution. It's not just cloth. It's a testament to Isolde's skill and years of patient labour. It represents her ability to clothe her new family, a skill as vital as any other. And, her father concludes, the big iron cooking pot and our second best set of knives. This might sound comical to us, but it was deadly serious. A good iron pot could last a lifetime. It was the heart of the hearth, the vessel in which all the family's meals would be cooked. To give it away was a significant sacrifice, and a powerful investment in their daughter's new life. Thomas's family listens, nodding. They are not taking notes, but they are calculating. They are weighing the value of this offer. Then it's their turn. It is a good offer, Thomas's father says. In return, our Thomas will provide. A room will be added to our cottage for them. He will build it himself. She will have a roof over her head and a warm place by our fire. He will share in the work of our land, and she will share in its bounty. And there it is. Shelter, food, security. The promises are simple, solid, and dependable. He's not promising her a castle, he's promising her a life. There's a moment of silence as the two fathers look at each other. This is the culmination, the deal. It is sealed not with a signature but with a handshake. They reach across the small space and clasp hands firmly. A promise made, a new family unit approved. The tension in the room breaks instantly. Smiles appear on the faces of the parents. Isolde dares to look at Thomas and he catches her eye, his own face lit with a wide, happy grin. There is no cheering, no applause, just a deep collective sigh of relief and satisfaction. Now the celebration. Isolde's mother ladles thick hot stew into the clay cups. The ale brought by Thomas's family is opened and passed around. The formal meeting dissolves into a shared meal. The parents begin to chat more easily, talking of village matters, of the harvest, of shared histories. They are no longer two separate parties, but the beginning of one larger family. And in this simple act of breaking bread together, the marriage is truly sealed. It's a communion based on mutual respect, practical need, and the shared hope for a good simple life. Isolde's future is settled. It is a future with a man she knows, whose hands she has seen work, whose voice she has heard, and whose family has just welcomed her with a shared meal by their fire. Her path forward is clear, and it is a path she will walk with a partner. But what of Eleonora, still swaying in her gilded cage, still moving towards an unknown fate? Her contract was signed in ink by men she may never meet, and at the end of her long road she will not be welcomed with a warm stew and a familiar smile. She will face something else entirely, a formal public presentation to a court of strangers and a first meeting with the man who owns her future. The swaying has stopped. After weeks of constant rhythmic motion, the sudden stillness is a shock. For a long moment, Eleonora just sits in the dim light of her litter, her heart pounding a new frantic rhythm against her ribs. The journey is over. There is nowhere left to run. The future is no longer at the end of a long road. It is right outside this door. The door opens and the bright grey light of a courtyard she has never seen before floods in. The air is different here. It smells of unfamiliar stone and the sea. A man in the elaborate colours of the Duke of Montaigne, a household steward, bows low. He does not offer a welcoming smile, just a formal deference. She is not led to meet her betrothed. Not yet. This is not a casual welcoming affair. This is a staged event, and it must be managed in phases. Phase 1 is to be taken from the litter and handed over like a diplomatic pouch to a group of silent, watchful ladies in waiting. They lead her through vast, cold corridors to a suite of rooms that will be hers until the wedding. Rooms that are far grander than her own at home and infinitely more lonely. And here, phase 2 begins the preparation. The narrator in my head wants to call this product presentation prep. She's bathed, scented, and dressed. The gown they put on her is a masterpiece of dark blue velvet and silver thread, heavier and more magnificent than any she has ever worn. It is also a uniform, the costume for her new role. The ladies in waiting work with an efficient, impersonal air. They are not cruel, but they are not friendly. They are assessing her, checking the merchandise, making sure the asset matches the description in the contract. Finally, she's ready. She looks in the polished silver mirror and sees a stranger. A pale, serious girl in a breathtakingly expensive gown, her eyes wide with a carefully concealed terror. The steward returns. "The Duke awaits you in the Great Hall, my lady." The walk to the Great Hall is the longest of her life. Her silk slippers make no sound on the stone floors. The only sound is the frantic beating of her own heart. The muffled sound of a crowd grows louder as they approach a set of towering carved wooden doors. This is it. Her final moments as just Eleonora, her father's daughter. The guards pull the great doors open, and she is hit by a wall of sound and light. The hall is immense, far larger than her father's. The ceiling soars into darkness, and the walls are covered in massive tapestries depicting ancient bloody battles. And it is full of people, hundreds of them. The entire court of the Duke of Montaigne, all dressed in their finest, and every single one of them turns to stare as she appears in the doorway. The low hum of conversation dies instantly. In the sudden, profound silence, she is the sole focus of every eye. At the far end of the hall on a raised dais sit two men. One is older with a grey beard and a heavy, powerful presence. The Duke. The other is younger. He's dressed in dark, rich colours, and as she begins the slow, deliberate walk towards the dais, she feels her breath catch in her throat. She tries to remember the portrait, the small painted face she has studied for hours, but the memory is a pale imitation. The real man is taller than she expected. His hair is just as dark, his jaw just as strong. But there are details the painter missed, or perhaps details the painter was instructed to omit. There's a faint scar above his left eyebrow. His eyes, which seemed merely serious in the painting, are colder, sharper. They are the eyes of a man used to assessing things, horses, soldiers' territories, and now her. This is Guillaume. As she gets closer, she can see that he is handsome, objectively so, but it is a severe, unsmiling handsomeness. There is no warmth. There is no trace of the gentle, suffering poet from her courtly love fantasies. This is not Sir Geoffrey. This is not even Thomas the Carpenter's son with the easy smile. This is a prince of this land, and he is looking at her as if she were a new map he was required to memorize. She reaches the foot of the dais and executes a perfect deep curtsy, her head bowed. She feels 100 pairs of eyes dissecting her every move. "My Lord Duke," she says, her voice a strained whisper. "My Lord Guillaume." "Lady Eleonora," the Duke's voice booms. "You are welcome. Rise." She rises, her eyes fixed on Guillaume, and for the first time he speaks. His voice is lower than she expected and smooth. "My lady," he says, "you honour us with your presence. The journey was, I trust, without incident." It's a scripted line, a formality. The medieval equivalent of asking, "How was your flight?" "It was my lord," she replies, her own words tasting like dust in her mouth. "I thank you for your concern." And then he stands and descends the 2 steps of the dais. He stops before her and holds out his hand. This is the moment. She places her trembling hand in his. His skin is cool and dry. His grip is firm, possessive. It is not a gesture of welcome. It is an act of claiming. He raises her hand, bows his head slightly over it in a gesture of formal respect, and their eyes meet. And in that moment she finds her answer. It is not hope. There is no reassuring kindness in his face. But it is not pure fear either. What she feels more than anything is a profound and soul-crushing sense of finality. This is it. This is her life. He is not a monster. He is not a hero. He is a stranger, and she belongs to him. The public viewing is complete. The contract, once just ink on parchment, has been visually confirmed. Now only one act remains, the ceremony that will bind them together in law and in the eyes of God forever. A wedding. And you have to wonder as Eleonora stands there with her hand in a stranger's grip, what does a wedding even mean when it is an event like this? A state affair of silent vows and political calculation. How different it must be from a village celebration of noise and laughter, and the union of 2 people who at the very least know each other's names. Let's leave Eleonora in that vast, silent hall, her hand held by a handsome stranger who now owns her life. Let's pull back from that world of chillingly formal arrangements and return to the world of Isolde and Thomas, where a marriage is not the beginning of a political strategy, but the culmination of a community's hope. The day of their wedding dawns bright and crisp. There is no team of unfamiliar ladies in waiting to dress Isolde. There is only her mother, her hands calloused but gentle, helping her into her best kirtle. It's not made of velvet or silk, but of good sturdy wool dyed a deep blue with woad. It's the finest thing she owns. In her hair she wears no silver circlet, but a simple wreath of ivy, late autumn flowers and rosemary for remembrance, and fidelity, woven for her that morning by her friends. She is not a political asset being prepared for presentation. She is a beloved daughter about to become a wife. When she's ready, she doesn't step into a gilded litter. She steps out the door of her family's cottage, and the entire village is there waiting. This is not a private affair. Her journey to the church is a procession of every person she has ever known. Her father, his face beaming with a pride that makes his eyes shine, takes her arm. A boy from the village plays a jaunty tune on a wooden pipe, and the small, happy crowd follows them on the short walk to the church, their chatter and laughter a protective, joyful bubble. The church itself is the same small, simple stone building they have been in 100 times before. It smells of old stone beeswax and the familiar scent of the community packed inside. There are no grand tapestries on the walls, only the sunlight streaming through the plain glass windows, but it is full. Every family from the blacksmith to the oldest goose-herding woman is here. They are the witnesses. Their collective presence is the seal on this union. Thomas stands at the front next to the priest. He is not dressed in fine silks, but in a clean new tunic his mother has made for him. He looks nervous, but when he sees Isolde walking towards him, his face breaks into that same wide, easy smile she saw across the bonfire at the May Day festival. It's a smile of pure, unadulterated happiness. The priest begins the ceremony. The words are not in the impenetrable Latin of a high mass, but in the common tongue that everyone understands. The promises they make are not about uniting territories or securing trade routes. They are about the real tangible stuff of life. They promise to be true in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. In the context of their lives, these are not abstract platitudes. Sickness could mean death. Bad times could mean a failed harvest and a winter of starvation. These are deadly serious vows, a promise to be a partner in the truest sense of the word, a fellow soldier in the daily battle for survival. They don't exchange gold rings. Instead, in front of the priest and the entire village, they perform the hand fasting. They join hands and the priest wraps a cord around their clasped hands, symbolically binding them together. One flesh, one household, one future. A simple kiss, a little awkward and shy in front of everyone, and it is done. The priest declares them man and wife, and the small church erupts in a cheer that feels like it could lift the roof off. But the ceremony is just the formal part. The real wedding, the real celebration happens now. The entire congregation spills out of the church and onto the village green. Tables have been set up and they are groaning with food. This isn't a feast provided by a single rich host. This is a feast created by everyone. It is the original potluck. One family brought a wheel of cheese, another a string of sausages. There are baskets of dark, dense bread pots of cooked beans and apples picked from their own trees. And of course, there are barrels of ale. This is a celebration built by the community for the community, a testament to their interconnected lives. The fiddle player from the procession is joined by a man with a small drum, and the music starts in earnest. The dancing is not the stately choreographed movement of a royal court. It is energetic, joyful, and a little wild. Thomas grabs Isolde's hand and pulls her into the dance, and they spin and laugh, surrounded by their friends and family. Their faces flush their hearts full. Their joy is not a private emotion. It is a communal one. Their union strengthens the entire village. It is a promise of continuity of new children of another household that will contribute to the whole. Their happiness is everyone's happiness. As the sun sets and the bonfires are lit, the party continues, a warm, bright island of light and laughter in the cool autumn darkness. Isolde and Thomas sit together, sharing a cup of ale, watching the faces of the people they love, their hands still clasped together. Their life together has begun not with the cold touch of a stranger, but with the warm embrace of their entire world. But a wedding does not have to be a celebration of joy. Sometimes it is merely the quiet, solemn execution of a contract. And back in the silent, cold castle of the Duke of Montaigne, the day of Eleonora's own ceremony is about to dawn. There will be no fiddles. There will be no communal feast. There will be no laughter. Only the chillingly formal theatre of a royal wedding where two near strangers will be bound together forever. And now, we must attend our final wedding. There will be no joyful procession here, no community potluck, no wild dancing to a village fiddle. This is not a celebration. This is the final scene of a political play, the solemn ratification of a treaty. This is Eleonora's wedding day. The morning does not begin with the laughter of friends and family. It begins in silence in the same grand, lonely chambers where she's been living since her arrival. The same ladies-in-waiting enter and begin the process of dressing her. Their movements are practiced and impersonal, their faces unreadable. Her wedding gown is a testament to the power and wealth of the two families she's about to unite. It is made of a brocade so heavy with gold thread that it feels like wearing a suit of flexible armor. The sleeves are lined with fur and the neckline is sewn with hundreds of tiny real pearls. It is breathtakingly beautiful, an object of immense value, and it is so restrictive, so heavy that she can barely move. It is a gown designed to be looked at, not to be lived in. It is the perfect metaphor for her new life. When she is ready, she is not met by a proud, tearful father. She is met by the Duke, her father-in-law. It is he who will walk her to the cathedral. This is not a father giving away his beloved daughter. This is the head of a corporation escorting a new high-value asset into the fold. The walk is not through a cheerful village, but through the echoing stone corridors of the castle and into a massive cavernous cathedral. It is a space designed to make a person feel small and insignificant, a testament to the glory of God and the power of the Duke who built it. The pews are filled with hundreds of nobles from across the land. They are not here to wish the couple well. They are here to witness the consolidation of power. They are allies, rivals, and spies, and their faces are a collection of polite, calculating masks. At the altar, Guillaume is waiting. He looks less like a nervous groom, and more like a young king at his own coronation. He is dressed in velvet, the colour of blood, a heavy gold chain around his neck. He turns as she approaches, and his expression is exactly the same as it was when they first met, impassive, formal, assessing. He gives a short, sharp nod of approval. The asset is satisfactory. The ceremony begins, and the Archbishop's voice, speaking entirely in Latin, echoes through the vast space. The words that will bind Eleonora for the rest of her life are spoken in a dead tongue, a language of power and mystery that creates an immediate barrier between the ceremony and any kind of personal feeling. It feels appropriate. When it is time for the vows, they are spoken so quietly they are almost inaudible. A mumbled "volo," I do, from Guillaume, a whispered "volo" from Eleonora. Their promises are not for each other. They are for the audience. They are for the historical record. Then comes the ring. It is not a simple band of woven grass. It is a thick, heavy ring of solid gold set with a diamond so large and cold it looks like a chip of ice. When Guillaume slides it onto her finger, its weight is a shock. It is not a symbol of love. It is a manacle, a beautiful, priceless fetter that binds her to him, to his family, to this land forever. He does not kiss her. He simply takes her hand, his touch as cool and dry as it was on the day they met, and turns with her to face the crowd. The Archbishop presents them the Duke and Duchess of tomorrow. The organ thunders a sound of triumph that feels to Eleonora like a death knell. The celebration that follows is not a party. It is a state banquet. The display of wealth is obscene. Entire swans are roasted and then redressed in their feathers. Intricate castles are sculpted from sugar. Wine spiced and expensive flows like water. Yet the atmosphere in the great hall is as cold as the stone walls. Eleonora and Guillaume are seated at a high table raised above everyone else on display like two beautiful lifeless dolls. They are the centre of the event, and yet they are completely isolated from it. They exchange a few stilted, necessary words. "The wine is very fine, my lord." "Indeed, my lady. The venison is well prepared." They are two strangers making polite small talk with the rest of their lives, stretching before them in a terrifying silent expanse. There is music, of course, but it is a troupe of musicians playing complex, stately tunes that no one can dance to. There is a poet who recites a painfully long and boring epic about the history of the Montaigne family. It is all a performance. A joyless, magnificent, and soul-crushingly empty performance. And so as the day ends, we leave our two brides at the threshold of their new lives. Isolde warm in a small cottage, her hand held by a man she knows, and trusts her future blessed by the genuine joy of her community. And Eleonora seated in a grand hall beside a powerful stranger, adorned in jewels, and bound by duty, her future secured by the cold hard currency of power. Their stories as young unmarried women are over. Their lives as wives are about to begin, and what becomes of these lives, what grows from a seed of practical trust, and what withers in a garden of gilded duty. To find out, we must let the seasons turn one last time, let the years pass by in a moment and see what remains, when the wedding finery has been put away and the vows have had time to age. And so a wedding dress is put away. A new cooking pot is blackened with its first use. A life begins. But what kind of life? What becomes of the promises made one in a crowded, joyful church, the other in a vast, silent cathedral? Let's not leave them there at the threshold. Let's allow the years to fall away like leaves from a calendar and take one last look. 15 years have passed. Let's find Isolde first. We find her not in her parents' cottage, but in her own, a sturdy little home with a neat garden built by her husband's hands. It is late afternoon, and she's on her knees in the garden, her hands in the dirt, weeding her vegetables. She's no longer a young girl. There are lines of laughter and worry around her eyes. Her hands are rougher, her shoulders a little stooped from years of hard work. A young boy, perhaps 10 years old, with his father's dark hair runs past chasing a chicken. A younger girl sits near her mother, carefully trying to tie a string around a bundle of herbs. Thomas comes around the side of the cottage carrying a freshly mended fence post. He stops, leans against the wall, and just watches his family for a moment. He is broader now, his face more weathered, but the smile he gives Isolde is the same. She looks up and sees him. She doesn't say anything. She just returns the smile. In that single silent look, a decade and a half of shared life passes between them. A shared life of failed crops and bountiful harvests, of fevers in the night and healthy births, of worries about money and the simple joy of a summer evening. Their love was never about poetry. It became something far deeper. It became a language of shared existence, of knowing the other's needs before they are spoken. Their life was not easy, but it was theirs, and it was built on solid ground. Now let's travel across those same 15 years and across a kingdom to the grand castle of the Duke of Montaigne. Let's find Eleonora. She is now the Duchess, a powerful and respected woman. She's in the castle's walled garden, a place of serene manicured beauty. She's watching her son, a serious, handsome boy of 12, practicing his sword, fighting with a master-at-arms. She learned the lessons her mother taught her. She became a masterful politician, a shrewd manager of a massive household, and a loyal, intelligent partner to her husband. She played the game, and she played it well. Guillaume the Duke enters the garden. He has been in a council meeting all day. He looks tired. He walks over to his wife, and they stand together watching their son. For years their relationship was a careful, polite partnership, an alliance. They were two CEOs running a very large, very important corporation. They were allies, not lovers. But years of shared duty, of raising a child, of facing political threats together, have forged a different kind of bond. It is not the passionate love she once read about in secret poems. It is not the comfortable, easy companionship of Isolde and Thomas. It is a quiet, deep-seated respect, a reliance on each other that has over time been warmed by a flicker of affection. He gestures to their son. "He has your focus," Guillaume says, his voice softer than we have ever heard it. "And your stubbornness?" Eleonora replies, a rare small smile touching her lips. He allows himself a small smile in return. A formidable combination. In that moment they are not a duke and duchess. They are just two parents, proud and a little worried about their child. A fragile, unexpected plant of true companionship has managed to grow in the cold, hard ground of their political union. She never found the fantasy of courtly love, but she found something else, something real. And so we see that love, or at least its cousins, companionship, trust and affection, finds a way. In the warm, rich soil of a village, and even in the thinnest crack in a castle wall. What do you think of these lives, these paths to connection? If this journey into the past has given you a sense of peace, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if there is another quiet corner of history you'd like to explore with us, we would love to hear it. And so, we leave them there. Isolde with the smell of earth on her hands and the sound of her children's laughter in the air. Eleonora with the weight of her title and the quiet, unexpected warmth of a partner by her side. Their stories, which felt so immediate, now recede. They become what they are, echoes from a distant past, whispers in a quiet room, the anxieties of a duchess, the worries of a farmer. They are just stories now. They have no power over you. They are just gentle companions here to help you drift away. The only thing that is real is the quiet of your own room, the safety of this moment. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be, no duty you must perform, no stranger you must meet. All that is required now is to let go. Feel the weight of the blanket on you. Feel the softness of the pillow beneath your head. Pay attention to the simple, easy rhythm of your own breathing, in and out. A rhythm as old and as steady as the turning of the seasons we just witnessed. Let the voices of the past fade away. Let go of Eleonora and Guillaume and Isolde and Thomas. Their journey is over, and now so is yours. Let the titans of history stand guard over your rest. Let them take the watch. All you need to do now is sleep. Sleep well.